Briefly to the sports talk. Made a very quick video initially to tell you about the botched announcement from AEW, and going to give a little bit more on that eventually. But there's one big thing that I want to talk about first, and this is something that I think concerns everyone, and in different ways, everyone. It does. Right. Wrestling fans. If you're going to watch AEW, you need to change. You need to stop becoming you need to stop being a reactionary society, and you need to start to think. Right? Everyone says AEW is a breath of fresh air. Fans will tell you is exactly the same, and these are the fans that just watch wrestling for the wrestling, which is what fans of WWE do, because no one can tell me they watch WWE for the compelling storylines, because they don't do them. Not unless it's the road to WrestleMania, anyway. So that's the change, right? We're now having detailed stories where things matter, little tiny details do matter in AEW. And now, whenever fans don't understand one little thing, they automatically assume it's because AEW have got it wrong. Let me explain to you how the AEW process works. And this isn't me being an assumptive fan, this is me quoting pretty much everyone from within AEW. All of the executives, all Tony Khan, and most of the stars, right? AEW are working backwards. Okay? So they already know what their big selling shows are for the pay-per-views. Of course, things will change if there's injuries or if someone pulls out or whatever, but there is a plan in place, right? Already going into next year, there are titles decided, there's matches happening, it's all already been decided. This isn't just happening on the fly, right? People are assuming that's how it is because, well, that's what we're used to in wrestling, right? That's what we're used to. We're used to being left in the dark, and then if we just see something slightly positive, we go, oh, well, that's great. This is great wrestling. Now AEW makes you realize that great wrestling is a different level to what you thought it was, and that WWE really, really need to work on their storytelling. There's another thing that wrestling fans need to change as well as their narrow-minded perspective. And that's that not everyone on Twitter is a wrestling genius. I've literally just had I wouldn't even say an argument. I've just had a bunch of idiots try to shame me for comparing a guy on Twitter to Jim Cornette. Because some guy, he was in some dispute over crowd reactions. And the guy says that when a certain move happened in the main event, the crowd popped for it. And then this guy says that there was no pop and that fans are delirious. He said fans are delirious if they heard a pop. Now, this is very important, this next bit. Right? Not every fan is going to use the words pop, mark, or any wrestling terminology. Right? Not everyone is going to use it perfectly, in perfect context. Not every wrestling fan is an anal wrestling fan. So, calling fans delirious for using the wrong terminology, and this guy probably does understand his point. He's just trying to make someone feel like shit for it anyway, which is a Jim Cornette thing to do. I point this out, and I basically get the equivalent of his little cornholes defending him. The only thing that was dumb was that remark of you comparing him to Jim Cornette. I'm like, well, not if you think about it, you know? Not if you actually think about it like someone who's not dumb. And I'm not dumb. I'm the least biased, least tribalistic fan in the world. And I can say that with absolute clarity. Right, I can say that with absolute clarity. I am the least biased fan, and I refuse to be called a biased fan on the basis that I think someone is acting like a dickhead. right? That's not an excuse to bring in this whole tribal war thing, you know, because then I got told that, oh, I'm just making this comparison because he's talking about AEW. And if you shame anything that's not WWE, you are not a true wrestling fan. You know, they think you've got you figured out. And it's like, I could rattle off on every single one of these people, but I didn't. I just stuck to my guns. I didn't get personal. I just proved them why I was right in what I said. And they were all backing them tooth and nail. He's right, you shouldn't have made that comparison. Right, and these are the sort of people that message you back after a minute or two, because I do that when I'm still online, right? So I was getting a response basically every minute from these idiotic fans, right? Until I ended it with this. So the conversation ended with this. The other person, this is after a whole argument where this person clearly doesn't get the point. The crowd did not quote unquote pop, as previously stated, and Bill was correct in saying that. The clip is right there as proof. The only remark that was done was comparing Bill to Cornette. And I don't mind exposing this guy, Bill. You'll probably see him online. He has a very recognizable name if you're an American. You'll recognize his name. I'm not going to divulge on his name apart from Bill. And the person defending was a girl called Bubba. Right, so that's who we've got defending. My response to that, and this is all after that whole delirious thing, right? Calling fans delirious for hearing a cheer, and then in brackets, which less anal fans would call a pop, unbracket, is a Cornette thing to do. Not swaying my mind on that one. That was 50 minutes ago, right? And I know that they've looked at it because after I messaged, everyone started to like her previous message, right? But if I had a response from anyone, no, because no one can argue with me. Because unlike them, I didn't take it to a personal level. I pointed out a fact and how this guy was talking. I kept it clinical and showed them exactly why it happened, and I've heard nothing back. I shouldn't have needed to do this, right? And I shouldn't have needed to point out a fan who was acting like Jim Cornette. Now, if you don't know, Jim Cornette is the most cancerous he is the most cancerous part of the wrestling community, if that makes sense. He spreads the most hate and disdain without cause or reason, and he's one of these quote-unquote wrestling critics who don't actually offer like alternatives. He's the sort of guy that will shit on your work and not come up with anything better, which I've always thought is hilarious, because he's always talked about, like, in the business, if someone gives you an idea and you turn it down, then you have to have a backup option, or they'll, you know, or it won't wash. You have to have your own idea. This guy doesn't have his own ideas. He just has the, oh, well, this is shit. Well, what should they do instead, Jim? It's like, well, I don't know, fucking not exist. You know, that sort of dumbass southern shit, or wherever the hell he's from. It's not just an Americanism. Like, wrestling fans are dumb, and it's not your fault. It's not my fault, right? You have to be an idiot to make sense of WWE. Like, you really do. There's no rhyme or reason to half the things that go on in that company. So when AEW starts, everyone just assumes that they're making all the same mistakes because, well, WWE, the biggest company, makes these mistakes. So naturally, everyone else will. No. AEW have been making mistakes, but they've not been making the mistakes in the storytelling, right? There might be the odd mistake in the ring, and there might be, you know, a couple of social media issues, but when it comes to the storytelling and giving you a reason to stay invested, they're knocking it out of the park. So, to touch up on the social media thing, I've obviously talked about that in a video prior, talking about how the botched announcement of Britt Baker and Britt Baker and Chris Statlander, which I think is a great match to have for a number one contenders match. I hope no one jumps down my throat for saying this, right? But I'm kind of glad that it's not a Japanese star that's getting a shot at Riho. I'm not quite sure what's going on with Riho. She was very promising. Now all of a sudden, New Japan bought Stardom in Japan, the female wrestling, and she hasn't been seen since. I mean, she might have made an appearance like a week or two, like after that announcement was made, but since then, not seen her once. And this is considering that others. That's considering, sorry, that there are indeed others. Wow, these horses are really muddled up. Right. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah. So Riho, don't know what the deal is with that. Hikaru Shida, I believe, should be the women's champion. Not now, as she's obviously not getting the number one contenders match. But as soon as they announced that Shida was moving to the USA, like, as far as I'm concerned, like that's the Japanese woman to go with, not Riho. I think we've gone with Riho purely because of Kenny Omega. And I get why. We've got this young girl. If she wins her first title, then she's got plenty of years to continue her legacy, and she won this big deal belt when she was young. But the more over Japanese wrestler is Hikaru Shida. The wrestler that I'm most impressed with and enjoy watching the matches of is Shida, because Riho is just too small. And I'm not one of these people where it's like, oh, you've got to be big and bulky to hold a title, because obviously that logic doesn't fly in the women's division. There is still a degree of believability about it, like Nyla losing to Riho was, for me, too much. I think Nyla should have won, but having said that, also, when you look at the women's title, the actual belt itself, it looks like it was designed for Riho, because it is so small. Like, not even joking, like, this is a small girl. This is a small belt. The plate is very small. The actual plate itself, very small. It's just baffling that she's been champion for as long as she has, with only having 2 title defenses. I think I'm right in saying maybe 3. I think it's 2. But anyway, seeing as we didn't make Shida the champion, I still believe that, having the Statlander Baker match is very important, because we've got to start putting over people that aren't from Japan. The Japanese women will elevate the women's division. There's no question in that. There's no questioning in that. They do that in NXT as well. Io Shirai helps take NXT to another level, as did Kairi Sane and Asuka when they were there, and they do make their difference to the main roster. They could do more, but they still make a difference even with the minimalistic roles they're given. So I'm not saying that it's bad to push the Japanese wrestlers. I'm just saying that if we're talking about marketability, if we're talking about someone who's going to go to, interview to interview, representing, talking to young girls across the country as an inspiration, you'd want Britt Baker or Chris Statlander out there. And this isn't a racist thing, right? But most of your heroes, like your personal idols, right, I imagine speak the same language as you. I'm sure there's exceptions, but most of your idols talk your language. So if you're French, you'll have a French idol, a French footballer. In England, you probably follow an English footballer. You know, that sort of mentality, right? So having an American champion in Britt Baker would be very important. And I'm not sure if Statlander is... I know the gimmick's an alien, but I'm not sure if she's from America or from Australia. But either way, you get that English-speaking person out there. It'll do a lot for your marketability. Like, Becky Lynch will always... she always had the potential to get more over than the likes of Asuka because of the language barrier. And even then, a Japanese woman fluent in English, you know, she still wouldn't have the same momentum. And that's not a company thing. That's a fan thing. That's not one of the things fans need to change, because as I've just pointed out, it's not really something you can change. Like, you can't tell little girls in America to stop cheering for the Americans and start cheering for the Japanese ladies just because they're the ones who are on top. You know, that's not how it works. So it's about finding that balance again in the women's division, and with Riho seemingly choosing Japan over America, I think a lot of people will probably boo her when she returns, because people will go, well, we've got SCU all the time, we've got Jericho coming out all the time, he bitches about his matches but he still shows up, where have you been? So Britt Baker and Chris Statlander, I mean, I expect them to be treated like heroes if they beat Riho, because very quickly the women's division in AEW has become the Joshi show, which I'm sure was Kenny Omega's idea, and then also took flight with the fact that not only were they being pushed, but they are good. I'm not gonna dispute that. Riho, Shida, all of them, they're good, right? They are very good. But like I said, doesn't change the fans' perspective. I don't want to just blame the fans, because there are small... Naturally, like I said, the social media thing for the number one's contender match, that's a spoiler. That was poor show. We're not even going to WWE, because we could be here all day talking about the issues of WWE. But to sum it up with one sentence, fire the writing team. You have a group of wrestlers, not professional actors who look great aesthetically. They look great aesthetically because they are professional wrestlers, and the reason they've got to WWE is because they could talk people into buildings off their own back, off their own genuine personalities. That's stripped away in WWE. Some keep it, but it's stripped away for most. They'll all tell you. Right? Did Ty Dillinger in WWE have half as much the personality he has as Shawn Spears already in AEW? No. See, that's just a small example. I think it's incredible, really, the whole landscape of wrestling right now, that we should all be so happy about these things, but we can only be negative, and that's why I'm focusing on the fans, because, right, the reason why we're getting all this backlash now isn't because of AEW, it's because of WWE, and it's because of fans not trusting them. We need to change that mentality, people. I have, you know, I mean, I'll admit I can't watch Raw and SmackDown because it gives me a headache trying to figure it out, but I love NXT. And I do love NXT, I really do. I loved half the main roster whilst they were on NXT. I watched NXT years before AEW was even conceptualized. Years before that I even started watching the Indies or New Japan. I'd even heard of them. I was watching NXT because NXT saved my love for wrestling. Because I couldn't stand Raw and SmackDown, but I didn't mind watching an hour of NXT a week. That was keeping me as a wrestling fan. So I'm not gonna shit on NXT for the sake of it. I've been accused of it, and I've been like, just fuck off. Seriously. I loved NXT for years, right? And as soon as AEW comes, all of a sudden you think I'm instantly wrong because you have your own fucking issues with the company. It's just so annoying, and people are very opinionated. And we've talked about this in a previous video. I'm not going to take the high road and say I'm not opinionated, because here I am giving my opinion. Although I will say mine isn't biased like most of the ones that you read about. And unfortunately, everyone goes to Twitter because Twitter is the best tool for selling and all that shit. But at the same time, it's also the easiest tool for people to be dicks on. And the fact is that there's a lot of dicks in the world. We all know this from when we went to school, from when we go to family reunions. There's always a dick. And when you come to the internet, which is where all the dicks gather, well, all the people, you know, you're going to get introduced to a lot more dicks than you're used to dealing with. And I should be focusing on the road. But yeah, you get the point, right? Like, of course there's going to be negativity, but let's just, if we're going to be negative about things, let's be negative about the things that actually warrant being negative. The other thing which is irritating is AEW are struggling for ticket sales. It's like, fuck off. This company is less than a year old, and the fact that they're selling any seats in every state they go to is a miracle. Because if this company had literally just announced themselves, so we'll say there was no pre-pay-per-views or whatever. Let's just say AEW just started completely from scratch 2 months ago. Would they be selling tickets at all in these places? Probably not. Right? So over the space of a year, they have garnered enough attention, enough interest, and put on shows good enough to warrant a decent amount of people showing up in places where they're not used to having a good turnout. Like, if you're a fan of What Culture or Wrestle Talk, later on today, you're probably going to have to deal with someone talking about struggling ticket sales, right? Let me tell you something. A company is not struggling to sell tickets if they're 1 year old, right? If this was a band, right? This is a band that formed a year ago. They're selling tickets in every state in the US, right? This place, the last place they did, there were some empty seats. I'm not going to hide away from that, right? But this is when we look at it like an intellectual, okay? So at this point, half of the fans of the internet are already going, "Huh, they're struggling with ticket sales. All the hype is gone. Not as good as they thought they were," right? The capacity of the last stadium they were in. Hang on.
I'm just about immune to pharmaceuticals. My blood's half upper, half downer.
Hang on a sec, everyone. Dealing with another idiot online.
One of these days I'll die at this bar, and and you won't even notice. I've been working these places so long, I've just about seen it all.
Right, just explaining continuity to a fan who claims that just because they're number one on the rankings doesn't make them the number one contender, blah blah blah, which it does. But people just see what I mean? People just can't think for themselves. You know, I've had to go just explain something basic again. It's like, oh, it doesn't mean that she's number one contender. It's like, yes it does. Yes it does. It means that if the guy champion was to say, I'm having a title match, it means number one would be first dibs for the shot. That's what it means, right? We just did the number one contenders match for the men's belts. We just did the number one contendership for the men's belts, and guess who the two teams were battling for it were, right? They were number one and they were number two in the rankings. In my mind, that is the very definition . Yeah, sorry, I keep getting lost in thought. Right, yeah, but that is the definition of a number one contenders match. The number one seed and the number two seed in the rankings, right? Look, everyone's right. It doesn't make sense. Shida should be getting the title match, right? But when it comes to the match results from Dark, she would no longer be number one. Britt Baker would be number one, and Statlander might be number two. I don't know that for sure, but if she has a singles record of 0-2, then in my mind that's going to be higher up on the list than Nyla's 3-3 and Hikaru's 3-2. Not to mention also that one of Statlander's win was against the number one contender, Shida herself. So all the logic is there. It requires very minimal thought. Like, am I the only one? Like, it requires very minimal thought to put this shit together. And yeah, a lot of people aren't going to pick up that this is a spoiler because a lot of people don't know the matches for Dark, and I am one of the hardcore fans who goes and finds out. Right, so this is all on AEW's head for making the announcement, but fans really just... It's not difficult, right? It's not difficult. Yeah, the number one seed isn't always going to get a shot, but that's because someone who's not number one might pin the champion. Right, that's when the rankings are moot and don't matter. Right, that hasn't happened. Right, we are getting a number one contenders match between two women who are potentially a way to have a better singles record. Right, and when they do, they will be, like I said, one will definitely be number one, and the other one might be number two. Ergo, number one and number two fighting for number one contendership. That is common sense. And the fact that you have to explain this to people, and people will actually still try to argue with you after you lay out the base facts, is scary. And ladies and gentlemen, more proof about me calling the wrestling fan base a brain-dead society, because this just proves my point, right? You can't be one of these people, or you are going to be miserable, and you are never going to understand AEW. And if you're not willing to invest in it and think about it, then I'm just going to say it, you shouldn't watch it, right? AEW is not for WWE fans, right? They made that very clear when they said they wanted it to be different. AEW, I forgot I was in a mission. Yeah, AEW, yeah, they're not for you if you like WWE. And if you're an intelligent WWE fan and you know that you're being insulted when you watch it, then AEW is worth a shot. But if you're going to give it a shot, don't treat it like WWE. Listen to... When people say this is going to be different, don't assume they're lying. Right? Cody Rhodes is not Triple H. Tony Khan is not Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon has complete control over the product. The wrestlers have control over the product in AEW. Most of what's going on right now is probably Chris Jericho and Cody's ideas. Right? So we can't bitch about writers. If there's something you don't like, it's because you don't like the wrestler and how they go about their business. Right? That's just the general outcome. So we're going to take this. We've got to take this van. Right, there we go. Just pretended that those guys were dumb WWE fans. It is, but does all of this just not sound painful? Like I'm trying my best to sell friends on the idea of AEW, and to be honest, it's working. Like, I have people that love AEW who didn't like wrestling before, but I tell them to stay off Twitter because the wrestling culture, like even the AEW fans, will just mind rape them. Because really, I can't stress it enough. We are acting so dumb. Like we are just, everyone's just hung up over stupid shit that's not in their control. I mean, talking about ratings now as if they're the kings of television statistical analysis. It's like, wow. Like, I don't get the logistics of the ratings. I know they're not accurate because there's other platforms, but everyone takes it to heart, and it's not even fascinating. It's just fucked up at this point. Because these are most of these arguments aren't between teenagers either. They're between grown men, grown adults, grown women, and it's blown out of proportion. Seriously, I should be getting paid to defend AEW against dumb fans. Because it is dumb. Because everyone just wants a reason to shit on them. And it's not even an attention thing anymore. It's people are being serious. Like, people are saying the things they say and they think that it has genuine validity. Like, that's what's embarrassing. I mean, again, you could say that about me, but I haven't been giving my personal opinion. I've been telling you what I've seen, right? My opinion is formulated by that. I don't watch NXT and then decide that AEW are failing as a company. I don't watch AEW and thinking, one day this company is going to rule the world and WWE are going to go bankrupt. Because WWE are never going to go bankrupt. The only way WWE are going to go bankrupt is if they get lawsuits from every single member of their company, and even then they'd probably still have several billion to spare. The WWE is a powerhouse. They're more than a powerhouse. They are the league, right? Again, more good choice of words from AEW saying they're the new league, right? WWE aren't like, if we're comparing this to football, or if you're American soccer, right? The WWE aren't the biggest club. That's not the way to look at it. They're the biggest league, okay? So we'll say that we'll say WWE is the Champions League. That's what it is, right? It's an establishment. It's going to go on because the titles have such history that it doesn't matter if it's crap, right? People are going to win these historic belts with all these years of history, right? That's an incentive big enough. As long as the prize has some history, people will find an incentive to watch. So WWE, I don't expect WWE to go away. I don't want WWE to go away because I love WWE for the spectacle. Emphasis on the spectacle. As a show, it's garbage. But as a spectacle, they are the best in the world. And they have a social media platform unlike any other wrestling company and unlike any other wrestling company will ever have. Right? There are advantages to being in the WWE. And WWE will go on. And I don't want them to die out. But having said that, I don't want them to kill off AEW either. And certainly not quickly. Like I want a few years of AEW. Like, is that so much to ask? Does that really make me such a bad fan that I actually want to enjoy wrestling for several years in my life? Not get pissed off by it all the time, and then just have the fans who are being pissed off feel betrayed, and then just end up shitting all over you because they don't know what else to do with themselves. Like that's the culture we've developed here, and as I've said, it is cancerous. It needs to change, and yeah. So if you're a wrestling fan, okay, NXT, and AEW put on shows that'll entertain you to another level. More dumb fans. It's a wonderful life. Enjoy. Try to be smarter.